Southwest Florida, welcome back to Lee Pitts Live. Where am I? Come on. I'm at Mount Hermon Ministries, of course. It's becoming my second home. I think in my 25, close to 30 years of doing this show, yes, this would be the place that I've been to more times in the history of Lee Pitts Live. Mount Hermon Ministries. That's a good thing, people. I love bringing the television show here, and there's always something great going on. Here we had our symposium, Racism, Justice, in the Christian Church. When I see the title of these symposiums that take place here at Mount Hermon Ministries, I'm always like, man, that's a great topic. So I'm so thrilled to be here as the moderator, and of course have the television show here as the media sponsor. And it's taking place here this evening. This is August 19th, and it's going to be live on YouTube, Facebook, the Mount Hermon Ministries website, I think, as well. We'll get all that from the pastor who's here. Big shout out to First Lady Glover as well, who did a great job in a recent symposium with all women involved. So without further ado, let's go with it. Gentlemen, welcome to Lee Pitts Live.
Thank you once again, Lee.
Where I know you from?
Lee Pitts Live at Mount Hermon Ministries and out in the community.
Oh, man, let me tell you something, Pastor. The last one we did, my wife and I, we look at these shows. You might not realize that. My wife likes to look at what I'm doing when I'm out in the field. She said, hey, he got on some funky socks, man. And she said, those are in style. She told me those are in style. That's the style now? I don't know if people can see them, but you saw them before.
Well, yeah, I think they used to be called crazy socks. I don't know what they're called now. I hope they're still in style.
She told me they were in style.
They're the only
my
socks
wife
I have now.
So. Right. And I was saying, you think I should get some? She said, he look good on him. I don't know about on you. So you got them on our people. I'm sorry if y'all don't see them, but we'll make sure they get to see them.
They don't need to see them.
They cool. You coordinate with the pocket square and everything. We have arrived. Well, let's go and get your name and your church.
I'm Corey Demmel. I'm lead pastor of Cape Christian Church over across the river in Cape Coral, Florida.
Okay, the Cape is over here?
The Cape is on this side.
My goodness. Tell us about your church.
So my church, incredible church. I'm privileged to serve there. I've been there 2.5 years. And I have a really unique opportunity to serve alongside the lead pastor. So Dennis Gingrich planted the church almost 35 years ago. He still serves full-time as our missions outreach pastor, chaplain of the police department. He turned over the lead chair about 10 years ago and just supports me, supports our ministry, still pastors the city, but allows me to lead the church. And it's an incredible honor. We have the park, we call ourselves the church with the park. Everywhere I go, I say Cape Christian. They go, "Where's that?" I said, "The church with the park, splash pad." And they go, "Okay." So we have a lot of people on our campus every day. We got a cafe. We got 5 services live, 4 now, but we had 5 before the pandemic, and just kind of a church for everyone.
Those are streaming, or those live people in the church?
So those were 5 live every weekend. I'd preach them all. We'd do live worship. Now we're back to 4 we've just reopened up with the pandemic. So and everything's online as well. CapeChristian.com.
Okay, CapeChristian.com. And Mount Hermon Ministries.com.
Mount Hermon Ministries, mthermonministries.org.
Okay, so we got the Cape here. This is groundbreaking. I say that in a kind of a comical sense for people who are looking at us around the world. We're in the Dunbar community, which is the heart of the African-American community in Fort Myers, Florida. We're in the southwest quadrant of the state of Florida. I'm always talking now like we're international because my show streams worldwide too, television show. I mentioned in the Cape because we rarely, at least, it just seems like Fort Myers and the Cape kind of function in their own 2 separate worlds. And this particular symposium has brought some Cape presence right over here in Fort Myers and Dunbar.
Well, absolutely. Right. And I think here is where I acknowledge Pastor Corey and Cape Christian, who once the George Floyd incident took place, were one of all of these pastors who actually on the symposium tonight who reached out and said, Dr. Glover, we're in prayer. What can we do to improve the situation, to build better relationships, and help heal and move our city and this nation in a more positive direction? And essentially gave 2 answers. I said, number 1, let's build a relationship. Let's get to know each other. Let's have some dialogue, some conversation. And this symposium idea was born out of that. And then number 2, I presented to each of them where they can engage in working on systemic justice issues long-term through interfaith for empowerment.
So the George Floyd incident you mentioned, I think that's a good jumping off point. The George Floyd incident has created such an open opportunity to talk and dialogue in the church, which is something you have been championed for many years now. So it's just really a good opportunity to kind of really make some progress with it now, huh?
It pressed to the forefront
Mm-hmm.
conversations that need to be had, that were lurking beneath the surface. And of course, with so much closed-mindedness and some regards bigotness and racism, it makes it a very urgent conversation for the church to have, for people of faith to have. I think the world needs the answers that we can provide, and this symposium helps us break the silence and cross the river,
Right.
bridge ethnicities together, and have this meaningful dialogue.
Now, when we have a pastor in this area who you can feel comfortable giving a phone call to and having open discussion, what does that do for you in terms of your ability to start the healing process, to talk to your congregation, to create this kind of community that we have right now, which is outstanding?
It's a great question, Lee. Well, that's everything, because I think a lot of people, and I would say a lot of the white community, want to be a part of the solution. They have questions, but they feel awkward even about their questions and don't know, am I going to be viewed wrong by even asking what could be an ignorant question or an inappropriate without me knowing it question? And so to have that relationship is so important. And actually we met on a symposium similar to this at another church in Fort Myers and just clicked right away. In fact, my 9-year-old daughter, he's like a celebrity in our house. Like, you're with Dr. Glover? Because they just loved his, not just what he said, but the authenticity and the heart behind it. And then, of course, I hadn't been in the community long, and his work speaks for himself. His reputation precedes him. And so I feel like I said I want to be intentional about that. But it's huge because now I feel like I had somebody to go to and say, hey, you don't know me, but I'm willing to take a risk on a relationship, and I'm interested in what your work is. And in getting to know me, I think he realized I was a part of a very diverse church in Omaha, Nebraska. I was a part of a collaboration of 200 churches. We were tackling diversity. It was a picture of heaven. And it was one of the things I missed about being transplanted here. And so I prayed. I've been praying for this opportunity. God, hook me up with the right guys. I'm the new kid on the block. I'm the young kid. In fact, I'm the one that's like, how did he get here? But I think God knows my heart. And again, to have that, I felt like it was God's answer to a prayer to say, this is a man who sits in the position similar to your pastor back home where we can have these dialogues. And I think God just worked it out where we felt like there was a kindredness and there was an understanding, and we kind of fast forwarded our relationship pretty quick. And then I took advantage of the opportunity to do lunch and get to know one another.
That's outstanding. Now, one of the things that you said several times is you said God worked it out. That gives me that the umbrella that you guys function under, the umbrella of God, Christianity, and that whole, that's a easy bridge to start walking across all different directions, right?
100%. And I've been in ministry 20 years. And I've learned that there's two types of pastors and two types of churches. There's churches that are about their thing, and there are churches that are about the kingdom. And you can tell real quick which are which. And it was very evident even before he said a word publicly that he was about the kingdom. And a lot of them are. All the guys here are. And so when you're about the kingdom, I think we all want the same thing. We want the gospel of Jesus. We want the whole Bible, not just our favorite parts. And so that does bring us together. And I think we should be the ones to lead the way, to have difficult conversations, ask the awkward questions, honestly, even disagree a little bit perhaps, but in a respectful way. Because we have a culture now that is, if you're not for me, you're against me, I'm going to cancel you out. And that's immature. And so we don't have to see eye to eye on every single issue, but let's have the most important things be the most important things, which means every individual was created in the divine image of God. They deserve the same dignity, regardless of gender, race. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think when you find that, you lock arms with people who do. And I always try to look for people who are ahead of the race in front of me. I want to learn from their wisdom. I want to learn from their expertise. And at our church, we say we want to be really great at a few things, so we're going to say no to a lot of good things. So for us, rather than reinvent a wheel and go, what do? I look who in my community is already doing it, and let's just lock arms with them. He's great at this. So rather than start my own little thing, let's engage and start the conversation with what Dr. Glover has been paving the way for decades.
Right. Now, let's just go into our imagination for a moment and just say, okay, in the 1960s, people are looking. Let's say they're looking on YouTube. They see some 1960 conversation, black pastor, white ministers, and trying to get some things done. But, of course, when we fast forward to the 2000s, 2020, we saw the rot. We saw George Floyd. Okay? So now they're looking at us. This 100 years from now. 100 years from now, they're looking at us. We historical figures now talking about something that has come to pass. What do you hope 100 years from now would have occurred because we stopped at this moment in history and started these types of conversations in the clergy?
I love that question. And my answer to that is I would like for them to see the rediscovery of something that was lost since all the gains of the civil rights movement you mentioned. And the thing that was lost over the turbulence of the 60s and the individualism of the 70s and the decadence of the 80s and the 90s is a sense of community and also a sense of justice as a core biblical justice, as a core biblical value that really pricked people's consciousness that we are community. And as far as the church is concerned, we're a broader community of faith. So what I hope happens as a result of George Floyd, forums like this, conversation that's happening at all levels, is that rediscovery of justice as a core biblical value, and that the church, regardless of denomination, can unite around that common value. If we can agree on that value and that God requires something of us, as Micah 6:8 says, and find a way to work with that core value to improve the quality of life of everybody in our county, then I think that would be a great thing.
Now, 100 years from now, when people are looking at this, hopefully they'll look at this and say, that kind of stuff that prehistoric stuff was going on back then. Society should have evolved a lot farther along the way, right?
Yeah.
So how should, 100 years from now, you hope society has evolved to what as a result of some things that we have stopped in time and done right now?
That's good. I would hope that history would say, if they don't erase that part of it, that the church led the way in a long overdue solution. That we saw the church leading in multi-gender, multi-ethnic communities, not just inside the walls of a church, but church leaders on other sides of the church, other sides of town, other sides of the river, saying, wow, that was when we no longer ignored some of the systemic and individual injustice things. And racism is a huge one. It's not the only one, and it's not the only one he's involved in. But that we didn't sit silent. I hope history looks back and go, man, 2020 was the tipping point. And I feel this way, Lee. I want to be on the right side of history. I want to be on the right side of history, and that's going to be some risk. There's going to be some people who aren't ready for the conversation. But what do leaders do? They go ahead, right? We plow the ground. We're the trailblazers, and so, and I think if we're wise, if we're wise as serpent, harmless as doves, we can, rather than scream like a lot of people are about being right. I think a true leader isn't just trying to be right. He's trying to bring as many people with him as he can. And I think that's the common ground we're talking about.
Okay, so we got a chance to sit at home in the comfort of our air conditioning and look at Black Lives Matter streamed all across. We're using Black Lives Matter as a title, but it was a bigger movement going on in America that was across all of our television screens. And we were just sitting there just like George Orwell, some kind of movie. We're like, whoa, this is going on. America is changing. Talk about you and some of the comments that your congregation may have had to you, questions as we were watching the unrest in America take place.
Well, I have a predominantly white but a pretty multicultural community as well, and so I think I always am careful when I speak for people, but I think you have white people asking, what can I do? You have white people going, this isn't my problem, or why should it be my problem? You have black people going, Pastor, what you going to say? You have Hispanics and Asians going, what about us? One of my best friends is Native American. He's like, are we going to talk about that? And so, it's this leadership challenge of going, man, I want to be inclusive, but not at the expense of ignoring or watering down a real issue. And so I think when we see this happening, for me, well, I'll tell you what I did, Lee. I did a lot of listening. I called a lot of people. I read a lot of things. I did very little talking. I talked to pastors. I talked to black leaders. I talked to politicians. I talked to city leaders. I talked to medical experts. My pastor, the man I call pastor in my life, is a black African-American pastor from North Carolina. And so I'm like, talk to me. His son and I are friends. My best friend is half black. And so like, hey, tell me your experience.
You had the benefit of that.
So I'm listening. And so I feel that because of that, I just want to paint a picture of, hey, here's some stories you wouldn't get to hear if you don't get to engage in these kinds of dialogues or friendships. And so I felt a responsibility to present a different alternative, maybe perspective, or tell a story you hadn't heard with maybe a real face on it that helps everybody just understand. This maybe hasn't hit your front door or affected you, but again, going back to the biblical justice side of things, even that at the core word of the Hebrew, that word justice means I need to take whatever I have and use it for those who have been less privileged or those who have been abused. And so, with the whole Black Lives Matters and everything else, even helping believers, because there's some Christians who have a hard time with the origins of the organization, the Black Lives Matters. And so for me, even delineating, first of all, most of us don't go to any restaurant or any organization or any political party where we 100% agree with everything. But second of all, there's a statement, Black Lives Matters, that is a little bit different than the organization. And what the black community I'm hearing to tell me is we just want to matter as much. And so it doesn't mean police lives don't matter. It doesn't mean white lives don't matter. It doesn't mean women's lives don't matter. It doesn't mean we don't have a real problem with pedophilia and sex slavery. Those matter as well. But in the moment, we're having the conversation about black lives. And, even Jesus telling a story about a shepherd who loses one sheep and he leaves the 99 to go get the one, which even Jesus showed at time, there's the sheep that's lost. He's the one that needs the attention. And right now, there's a sheep that's lost that's needing and getting. It's only 300 or 400 years overdue, the attention that it probably needs. Does that make sense?
The help of the broader shepherds. Now, the shepherds who are helping the sheep, it's a broader amount. And that's what moves the pendulum forward. He said a lot of great stuff. Let me try to
That's why he's on the panel.
Right. Let me try to be a real television talk show host, even though it just looked like I'm winging it. Okay. Let's go back to you sitting there watching television just like me in my particular place, you looking at it from a perspective of, okay, I'm starting to see all these white people on television, right? Because I was looking at it on television. I'm like, hey, there's a lot of white people. There's a lot of white people. What are the white people? Because it was a totally different experience for me to see that, and then I felt this deep, hey, something's gonna come out of this as a result of this. You already probably your brain is turning because you're already involved in this. Did your brain start moving towards now? Because I know you said it before. You felt like, I think it was like, I don't know if you said it to me on air or off air, but you felt like you were just like put here for this moment. Go.
Okay, well,
I said a lot of stuff with no question.
Yes,
right?
but I understood it. There is a wonderful passage in Ecclesiastes 4:1 where Solomon says, I looked out and saw all of the injustices in the world, and the oppressed cried. No one heard their cry because power was on the side of the oppressor. So what happened with the George Floyd situation and why it's so different is people who have been oppressed, discriminated against, have been crying for decades. But this was so horrific, and in everybody's living room, they could see and determine with their own eyes, this is not policing. Something's wrong with this. And so suddenly that visual allowed a broader spectrum of the country to hear those cries. So the answer to the question in terms of why there were so many whites and Asians and Hispanic people championing the cause of racial justice, they heard
male, female.
They heard the cry. The cry was no longer deniable, and that is what has accounted for this swell. Because I believe Americans are more decent than some of the sentiment that's been expressed in the political arena about these issues. And hopefully this conversation helps weed out the politics of it, and we get to the humanity of it and begin to bridge the gap with all of this. Now, as for myself, the second part of your question, that's a two-part question. The second part was, yes, for me, just having the dialogue take place on the national, state, local level was very affirming for me because, as you know, these are issues I've been championing for more than a decade. I've written my doctoral dissertation on it, published a book on this. I've spent time over the past decade training, educating churches, both home and abroad, in this sacred call to do justice. So it was very affirming. And then to have that affirmation realized when people of faith are now calling, say, Doc, didn't you do something on this? Help us understand. Talk to me about this. And so that in part accounts for why tonight is happening.
Outstanding. Now, when I was raising this paper, I wanted to get that word in. You brought that word up. I thought I was going to be the smart guy and say, not just Americans. When you said America can do better, I was looking for that word humanity. Beyond the particular country, the humanity started to come out in humans, right? Like any human who saw that. I'm not as spiritual as you guys and all of that, but I want you to kind of talk to me about the humanity of a person, the gospel, and all these things that will naturally kick in at a certain moment in time that you can't deny what you're seeing?
Well, he said it. With George Floyd specifically, it was the tipping point. We saw it in front of our face. And if you have any sense of your humanity, and especially if you're a believer and you've read anything about the Bible, believe anything about it being true, you understand that is what makes us different than anything else that God created. Is He said He put His image in us, so we're different than praying mantis and pandas and honey badgers. We are in the image of God, and so to see anybody on either side of power mistreated should bother us. Because what that shows is that we have the heart of our Heavenly Father. And I think even for the unchurched, for the non-faith community, that's what's moving is that we want to just acknowledge the humanity and equality. I mean, equality was a Jesus concept, and it's really compelling. It's whether it's in Rome or Israel or Egypt or the United States of America or Iran or Syria or whatever the case may be. And I think, and again, the church has the opportunity to lead the way in acknowledging our humanity. Think about, Lee, how many problems would have been solved individually and systemically if every time we sat across from somebody different with us, the first thing we did is acknowledge their humanity and establish common ground versus let's start picking apart what's different. And the minute you say something that's different than me, I'm going to figure out who's more right. Now, it's about humanity.
That's right. And when I was watching it on television, this time, I was listening to all these different people, like athletes, entertainers, commentators, so on and so forth, civil rights activists. But the moment I started hearing pastors, that's when I would listen closely. All these different denomination of pastors talking. It was like, this is who we need to be listening to. Why is that?
Because I think the heart of the gospel and the heart of the message of every pastor is redemption and reconciliation.
Yes.
And redemption is twofold. It is man getting his relationship right with God, being redeemed to God. But as a result of that right relationship with God, men redeeming their relationships with each other. And so entering into faith with Jesus, and the distinction I always like to make, is that individual redeeming his relationship with God, but engaging in the work of justice is redeeming the relationships amongst each other and amongst communities and ethnicities. And at the heart of every minister of the gospel, that idea of redemption and reconciliation is there. This dialogue is designed to press us past the individual relationship with God, which we acknowledge, to who then is my brother, which is the essence of the story of the Good Samaritan, where this Jewish traveler passes an injured another Jew on the road, would not give him assistance. And then a Samaritan comes by, different ethnicity, different belief system, but the humanity came through, took the injured traveler, took them to the inn, paid for their lodging, all their medical treatment. And Jesus asked his audience a profound question. He said, then who then was his brother? And so our brother is anyone in our proximity that we have the influence and or the ability to make a wrong right or provide needed assistance. So this is an opportunity for the church to demonstrate brotherhood. There's some clear wrongs at work in our society. It doesn't make us an evil society, a bad society, just makes us an imperfect society. And that's why we need redemption in the gospel. And this is an opportunity for us to demonstrate brotherhood through the work of justice. Okay,
I'll be over there to you in a second. I've been around you long enough to know how methodical you are. You don't just grab some words out of the blue. When you titled this symposium, Racism, Justice, and the Christian Church, I want to take those one at a time as briefly as possible. Why did you choose those three words? The last one is kind of like a statement, the Christian Church, but racism, justice, the Christian Church.
Well,
I know you didn't just grab them out the sky.
Because those are difficult conversations. Difficult conversations, but the church must have them. Racism is a conversation the church has to have. We can't sweep it under the broad umbrella of let's love one another and God is going to make everything all right. We have to take a look not only at how people believe, what they believe, but also how do we behave relative to those beliefs and how those beliefs impact our interaction and also how they manifest in the systems that govern our lives. That's racism. Justice, because we want to expand the understanding of what justice is. It isn't just something God calls us to believe in. It's something he calls us to engage in, to do. He's told you, old man, what is good, what does the Lord require? But to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. So what is this call to do justice? The most simple illustration I have for that is the church is good about feeding people, doing benevolence. Okay, that's a sacred calling. It's very good to do those things. That's loving mercy, doing benevolence. Justice is asking the question, why am I needing to feed people? What's at work that's causing people to be dependent on having somebody else feed them? And the work of justice is about eliminating those causes so people can feed themselves. And that's where we want to push the envelope to the church, to where we start identifying systemic causes that put people at a disadvantage or discriminated against or makes it difficult for them to live independent lives.
I see. When people walk away from watching this symposium this evening, streaming all over, and then some people go back and see it on social media. People go back to see it. You can go to the Mount Hermon YouTube channel, Facebook page, and all of that. We'll get more details on that as we go through it. But what do you hope that they take from tonight's experience?
A couple things. I hope and pray. I've been praying all day for this, for humility. First of all, it takes humility to be willing to learn or listen to something that's different than what you thought was true, to be willing to be teachable. And so I hope that people will leave this with a perspective that they didn't have before they heard it. I believe that maturity and wisdom is expanding your perspective. It's been my journey, and that is only done by listening. We don't want more information. I think a humble, teachable spirit is, I don't want more information so I can be right more. I want to get more information so I can get it right more. And so I pray that, and I hope that people that hear this would say, wow, I'd never thought of it that way. I'm really glad they phrased it that way. That's a really good point. And then second, that this would encourage other people, community leaders, neighbors, friends, coworkers, to sit down and go, I was watching these guys, and some of them knew each other, some of them had become new friends, but they were having these tough conversations. Could I have that kind of conversation with you? That this would be a catalyst for the coming together and asking the tough questions and having the more difficult conversation. And it would inspire others to say, this is my problem. That it's not just a leader or a pastor or the black community or, I live in this community. Like, no, going back to the very first sin, who is my brother? Am I my brother's keeper? Cain knew the answer to that question. Yeah, you are. And so just that, it would inspire, provoke others to good works, to the same type of thing.
What do you hope people would take from this?
Listen, if we get what Corey just said, there isn't much more that I can add from that to that. But
let me go with another question then. Let's give me an opportunity. I think this is maybe about the fifth type of symposium of this nature. All of them have this type of concept to them. We had the all-female one as well. Are you going to keep this going on?
Well, when I did the first one, I had no vision beyond the first one. But immediately afterwards, there was such enthusiasm about it. We need to do this again. What are we going to do next? And I said, well, let me just give some thought to it and we'll see what happens. And then the Lord began to speak. And, of course, we're on our fifth one now. And so the only thing I'm determined to do, as long as it's relevant, as long as there's interest, and as long as God continues to lead that we do it and it achieves an end, we'll continue to do it.
Well, I know you don't need to get my advice, but I think it's going to always be relevant. And remember, we're trying to continue to leave some materials for that group 100 years from now who's looking at us. Hey, y'all, 100 years from now, looking at us. Yeah, these clothes look funny, but this is the way we dress back in 2020. Pastor Glover, thanks for having the vision, your church, and continuing to do these things. I'm sure we're going to do some more, okay?
That's your man.
Thanks for coming out. We're going to take a break right now, talk to some more ministers who are here before we get started, if we got enough time, and I'll hang around for the second part. I'll do something afterwards. For those who say it can't be done, they're usually interrupted by those like these fine ministers and all the people who are associated with this symposium we're doing it. We'll be back after the symposium.
Lee Pitts Live is a Lee Pitts Enterprise production.
Hello, Southwest Florida. Thanks for watching Lee Pitts Live. Of course, I'm Lee Pitts. I hope you enjoy that particular show, but you can always catch us here on YouTube. Just click on the subscribe button down there. That way you can get your Lee Pitts Live on demand when you want it and how you want it. We also encourage you to watch our show on FOX4 and connect with us on all our social media platforms. Just type in Lee Pitts Live.